What's up, Benfica Nation? Welcome to episode 63 of Mr. Benfica. I am your host, the Mr. Mike Agustinho. And as you could hear from that opening, it's not going to be a fun one tonight, all right? A lot has happened. There's a lot to talk about. I'm going to try to keep this episode under 2 hours tonight because there's just so much to talk about. And there's another game coming up in just a few days. So, man, where do you begin? You heard it there. You heard the goal from Zé Manel that buried Benfica, that basically all but ended the title hopes there at the empty Estádio da Luz. You wouldn't know it from the great sound engineering of BTV, piping in some crowd noise for that match. Unfortunately, that crowd noise, they should have piped in, some boos or some whistles, because that fake crowd was cheering when Santa Clara took the lead. Although how bad would a crowd have turned on this Benfica team in that match? Okay. It's hard to say, but I'll tell you one thing. I am sick of hearing about the crowd. I'm sick of hearing about this empty stadium and that we're talking and we're acting like we're dropping points because there's no fans in the stadium. If that's the case, then our team is no good. Our team is not professional. Our team is not level-headed. Our team is not inspired. Okay? And as someone who has worked hard to make a living as a coach in the past, okay, very hard to make a living doing that. I think anyone out there who's tried can attest to that. Okay, it's very hard to make a living. You don't get paid much until you get to the big time, and it's hard to survive on that. And I say that because it's always a sensitive subject with me when we talk about sacking a manager. Okay, it's always a sensitive subject. I don't like to see any managers, any coaches, especially, lose their job. Okay, and I'm not talking necessarily about Bruno Lage. Bruno Lage is going to get a nice deal out of this if and when he finally gets dismissed. Benfica's going to have to pay him some good money because they were wise enough to sign him until 2024. And for those of you watching on YouTube right now, okay, some of you can see me on YouTube. You see my hand is going up. I'm one of the ones that was wrong. I'm going to admit it. I was wrong a year ago, 6 months ago, a year ago, I think it was, at the end of last season, when this manager was re-signed to this contract. I was wrong. It's becoming obvious we don't have the next Jose Mourinho on our hands, at least not yet. I got caught up in the fairy tale that was Bruno Lage last season. I owe the existence of this podcast to Bruno Lage. Make no mistake about it. If he doesn't have that start that he had last January of 2019, who knows if I ever get this podcast off the ground? Who knows if I ever, put into motion my hopes and my plans of having a Benfica-themed podcast. And with that, in the way that Benfica played under Bruno Lage in 2019, okay, if you want to look at it just from results, from January to the end of 2019, I don't think any Benfica manager has ever had a better record in a calendar year. But we were all fooled, myself included, I think. Nothing goes that well and that perfect forever. And I got caught up in the romanticism, if you will. I got caught up in the fairy tale that we had in our hands here. The next great manager in world football. Maybe the next, I said Mourinho, we could say the next Pep Guardiola, because Pep took a similar role, at least in his career. He took a similar path from coaching Barcelona B to Barcelona's first team, and the rest is history. I thought maybe we had something like that here with Bruno Lage, where 10 years from now we're talking about a manager on top of the world. And I mean, something happened. Okay, something has happened in that team. Something has happened in that locker room. Something has happened in the board. Something has happened in the mind of Bruno Lage. Okay, he's not the same manager he was a year ago. Those of you listening in podcast form that are listening to the podcast, you heard at the end of the intro there, Bruno Lage first in the Flash interview, where at the time I didn't think anything of it, but his players took exception to his Flash interview where they felt he threw them under the bus. I think they're a little bit too pampered and too babied, if you ask me. That's what I think about these Benfica players. Okay, I think there's way too much ego and not enough output from the men in that locker room. Okay, by and large, the majority of that team has an attitude problem from what I can see. They have a motivation problem from what I can see. And clearly their egos are bigger than what they're giving. And you heard him sort of do that. And then in the post-game press conference, it just goes into the bizarro world where he just starts to accuse the media of all people. And listen, I put my hand up again. I am no fan of the media. Okay. I think the media is pretty much garbage, whether it's in Portugal, in the United States, in Britain. People in media, in the work that media does right now is horrible, in my opinion. It's irresponsible. It is looking just for clickbait and for emotional responses. It's not looking for facts. And they're no different in Portugal. The sports media is no different. They're trying to sell a story just like any other media. And Bruno Lage, makes really some foolish comments where he starts to accuse the media of conspiring to get him out of his seat. No, Bruno Lage, they don't care if you get out of your seat. They just want to tell the story. Okay? Bruno Lage, someone who a year ago was giving lessons in football, was giving lessons in class, lessons in respect, lessons in decency in his press conferences, now has resorted to he's basically gone into survival mode where he feels, listen, this is a manager who does not feel supported. You can see it, okay? I think he feels his players don't listen to him. He feels he's losing the support of his board, and he feels attacked by the media. He knows fans are not on board with him anymore also. Listen, these guys, whether they're players, whether they're staff, whether they're coaches, whether they're the president, the board, they all have grasp of what the fans think. They have a grasp on the pulse of the fan base, okay? Don't ever believe a manager or a player or a president who tells you they don't read the headlines. They all do, okay? They all do. And if they don't read it, someone reads it for them and gives them a quick summary of what's out there. They all read that. And listen, again, I really am sensitive to this, but I think it's time for Bruno Lage to go. Obviously, he's not going to step down. There's a lot of money that's owed to him, and I wouldn't do that in my job. I don't think any of you listening would step down from your job if you had that kind of money left on the table to earn. Okay? You would tell your boss, I'll leave, but we're going to make a deal before I leave. I'm not going for free. Okay? It's not his fault they offered him a contract that was way too long range in time. It's not his fault that they offered him $2 million a year or whatever it is that he's being offered and that they now owe him. Okay? That contract was proposed. He accepted it. Any one of us would have done the same thing. No one's going to get a contract for 5 years or a 4-year extension at let's just say $2 million a year. I don't know the exact figures, and say, no, Mr. President, things could go wrong. Let's cut that back to 2 years. And I think you're overpaying me. No, nobody's going to do that. So anyone who wants him to just walk away because he's a quote unquote Benfiquista, even a Benfiquista, he still has a family. He still has bank accounts. He has bills. He still needs to be paid. He's not just going to walk away from this life-changing money that is owed to him. Okay, so I have to dismiss that claim. Now, I do believe in my gut instinct. Okay, and I have been sacked. Okay, let me say that first. I know what it's like to be sacked. I know what it's like to be an assistant and have the head man get sacked. I know what it's like, okay? This is not just about Bruno Lage. This is about Nelson Verissimo. This is about Johnny da Conceição. This is about the entire staff. If Bruno Lage goes, they're going too, for the most part. Okay, there's a few elements of the staff that will stay. Pietra will probably stay on. Although, if you read Abola, they're saying that Luizão will be part of the next regime, the next coaching regime. Luizão will be inserted in the technical staff of the next manager. So the way a staff is built, there's the close coaching staff, which the manager brings with him, or it's his close confidants, right? And I mentioned their names: Nelson Verissimo, Johnny da Conceição. Okay, they were all with Bruno Lage when he was with Carlos Carvalhal at Swansea and at at Sheffield Wednesday. Okay, they were with him. Okay, that is his staff. Benfica also has elements of the staff that they named. Pietra, I mentioned his name. Okay, so they're gonna have to figure out what every single one of those staff members' role is going to be, who's going to be dismissed, who's going to stay, and how much do they owe each dismissed member. So firings are not as simple as they sound, or sackings. Okay, they're not as simple as they sound. With that said, okay, I do believe that behind the scenes, talks have begun. I think Bruno Lage gave the team the day off the morning after the match because I believe he had conversations with the president or with the director of football. If Rui Costa is still that, I don't know what his job is, to be honest, other than to give a couple pointers from the sideline and be videotaped at the match. So I don't know, but I do believe that talks have begun. Okay, we'll talk in the news segment about the rumors about who may be coming or who the press thinks is coming. Very sad, okay? Because I think Bruno Lage is at a point of desperation. I think that press conference shows that he's no longer mentally fit to do this job. And what I mean by that, the stress has been overwhelmed. He knows he doesn't have the support of the locker room. And no matter whose fault it is, once the manager loses the locker room, there's nothing he can do there anymore, okay? So I think it's time to move on. And I'm not, it's not easy. There are people that are going to be hurt by this. There are people who are going to lose their jobs. Not everybody's going to find a new one. Bruno Lage will find a new one. I'm not so worried about him. But there are people that work under him that may have a harder time in the future finding work. All right. This is episode 63 of Mr. Benfica. Like I said, we're going to get into the news right after this message. We're going to pay a bill real quick, and then we'll get into the news. And unfortunately, after that, we're going to have to sit here and unravel all that was Benfica 3, Santa Clara 4 in round 27 of the Liga NOS. This is Mr. Benfica. I am the Mr. Mike Agostinho. You can follow me on Twitter at Benfica Mister, on Instagram at Mr. Benfica, on Facebook by typing www.facebook.com/Mr. Benfica. Don't forget to check out MisterBenfica.com. And if you're watching on YouTube right now, this is where I say goodbye to YouTube. And remember, right down there, hit subscribe, all right, so you can get more stuff from Mr. Benfica going forward. We'll be right back after this message.